The Secrets of Star Trek is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing the latest episode of Star Trek Picard Season 2, Assimilation. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Akin. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Cory Sticha. Hi, Father Cory.
Resistance is futile. Hi, Dom.
Hey, Father Cory. Thank you again for filling in for me last week when
pleasure.
I had my brief assimilation into the jury pool. But I escaped. So before we get started, I want to tell everyone you can get your very own Secrets of Star Trek TV shirt and other cool gear by visiting...
TV shirt, cool. I haven't had a TV shirt. That new wearable technology is coming along nicely.
Yes, I know. Oh,
you
my
could
gosh.
be your own Teletubby.
I just edited Raising the Bets, and I caught myself doing that. I hate when I go back and hear myself malapropping throughout. But yes, get your very own.
It's frustrating, just like an allegory on the banks of the Nile.
That's right. Get your very own Secrets of Star Trek t-shirt and other gear, cool gear, by visiting sqpn.com/merch. That's MERCH. Mugs and other phone cases and stuff. You'll have a very cool design of me and Jimmy and Father Cory all riding atop the Enterprise NCC 1701. It's a lot of fun, so check it out there. Just let us know how you like the design even. Stick around to the end of the show. We have a lot of feedback, a lot of listener feedback, and it's all great, so we're going to talk about that. And before we get started, I want to tell you about another show on the network you're sure to enjoy called The Catholics of Oz. You can find that wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/OZ. So let's talk.
By the way,
Yep.
Also before we get started,
Sure.
Props for knowing the word malaprop.
Oh, thank you.
By chance, do you know where it comes from?
No. Where's it come from?
So it comes from a play. Now, for people who may not be aware, a malapropism is where you use the wrong word for something, like an allegory on the banks of the Nile instead of an alligator on the banks of the Nile, which itself would be wrong because they don't have alligators there. But it comes from, and malaprop, as you can hear, I mean, prop is related to proposition, and mal, it means bad. And so it's like a bad thing. You say the bad thing, say the wrong thing. And it comes from a play from the 1700s, if I recall correctly, called The Rivals. And it's a British play, and it's a comedy. And one of the characters in the comedy is Mrs. Malaprop, who is characteristic for using the wrong word at the right time. And so I've seen The Rivals. I saw a production of it once on like PBS or something, but it's a lot of fun. You've got these kind of comic stock characters in this farce, and it's enjoyable.
Oh, cool. Fun. I have to check that out. All right, so we are talking about this episode. It's the third episode of the season 2 of Picard, and called Assimilation. And Jimmy, can you give us a recap of what happens?
Last time, totalitarian security forces beamed onto La Sirena, captured everyone, and announced that Picard would be executed as a traitor, killed in the act of rescuing a Borg. This time, the La Sirena gang makes short work of the totalitarians and phasers them all out of existence. But Elnor was mortally wounded at the end of last episode, and this episode he dies, causing Raffi to freak out. Don't worry, though, because they hang a lantern on the fact that he'll come back to life when they change history. Speaking of changing history, the Borg Queen flies them around the sun and they arrive back in 2024, but they crash and the Queen is severely damaged. Raffi, Seven, and Rios go to Los Angeles to try to find the Watcher who can help them fix history, but when transporting, Rios also is severely damaged by falling from a great height. He meets a cute doctor at a neighborhood clinic, but he loses his comm badge, and then he loses his liberty when La Migra raids the clinic and takes him and the cute doctor into custody. Meanwhile, back at the ship, Picard lets Agnes plug herself into the Borg Queen to help repair her. This is risky because it means a partial temporary assimilation, but Agnes not only gets away with it, she also steals the Borg Queen's secret knowledge of where the Watcher can be found and when history will be changed. The end.
Excellent. So before we get into the episode itself, an interesting little behind-the-scenes note. This episode was directed by Leah Thompson, who is the actress from such films as Back to the Future and
Wow. Cool.
Jaws 3D, I guess. I didn't know that. She apparently in 2006 got into directing TV. So sort of like Robert Duncan McNeil and others like that. She's become a TV director. So she directs this and a future episode of this season, which has been not named. So I thought that was interesting. So getting into this one, that big cliffhanger from last time, and now we start with this. And 7 starts off by they're obviously caught in the act red-handed.
Mm-hmm.
And she tries to bluff her way out of it as president. He's not buying it
by telling her husband, "You are how dare you? You are interrupting a classified operation."
Yeah, and he says, "What's my middle name?
What's my full name?
What's my full name?" Right,
and he never gets one because they immediately phaser him out of existence.
Disintegrated.
I went back, and it's that modern gloopy phaser effect where there's a little biological after thing that happens for a second. So it's not like in the original series where the person just shimmers and fades out. It's more gloopy than that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I went back to check because given Jerry Ryan's political husband situation in real life, I wondered, did they have 7 kill her husband on screen? And no, it was Raffi who did it.
I don't know if people know this, but basically, Jerry Ryan was responsible for us having President Barack Obama. Did you all know? Basically, her husband was a senator from Illinois, and when they had their political and personal scandal that caused him to fall from grace and leave office, Barack Obama was elected in his place as the junior senator, thus beginning his rise.
Yeah, I don't know that I would say that Jerry Ryan was responsible as much as her husband was responsible.
Yeah, her husband was let's call him a cad and just leave it at that. He was a really bad dude.
Yeah. And in any event, I have in my notes at the beginning of the episode when he got phasered, ex-husband.
I bet that was pretty satisfying. They pretty readily disintegrate them. There's not a whole lot of
there's not hand wringing. It's just zap, he's gone.
Yeah. But there is a bit of a plot hole here, which is the same phasers that disintegrated those guys just put a hole into Elnor. Why didn't Elnor get disintegrated?
Different setting.
Yeah, I kind of feel like that's a bit of a we're hanging up.
I think that was an oops.
Yeah, we can't have Elnor be disintegrated.
Yeah, but I tend to not sweat super tiny problems that they could fix with a line of dialogue or a single cut. If all they've done is, because we see them taking the phasers away from the security people, all we needed to see was a 1-second clip of someone twisting a knob on the phaser before firing it.
Yeah, although that would be a major character moment, because I assume that their disintegration setting was because that's what these bad mirror universe evil guys would have it set to, but that would imply that our guys are going for disintegration, which is an escalation.
Yeah.
So that would be a character point. So even that is, I think, is a bit more of a gap. But, that's fine.
I hate to say it, but the idea that they changed the phaser settings once they got them from the security people is kind of it's not really, it's implied maybe, but it's not really there. You don't hear anything, sometimes, you'll hear the chirp, 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 chirp as they change the settings, and you don't have anything like that. So I think this was an oops in writing there, that they went from it just put a big hole in his shoulder to disintegrated the bad guys
or chest. Yeah. It actually, I'd have to go back to the previous episode and see, was it the husband that shot Elnor, because his gun might have been on a different setting than the security attendants.
True. They might have had different settings.
That's a good point.
That's
too.
True.
Yeah.
So we have the Queen who escapes the force field that she was in to take control of the ship. Like, so she takes over.
It's not so much she escapes the force field as the chamber she's in crashes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's out of it now. And I like how there's this moment, there was this moment, and clearly they're building to something with Agnes and the Queen. That's very obvious by the end of this episode. But even at the end of last episode, there was this meaningful exchange of glances between Agnes and the Queen, indicating they were going to do something with these characters. And they start to pay that off at the beginning of the episode, where the Queen is out of her chamber or pod or whatever you want to call it. And Agnes is on the floor, and the Queen is on the floor using her two arms because she doesn't have any legs. So she's using her two arms to walk around, and she's just smiling, and Agnes is like totally freaking out about, is she going to assimilate me right now?
It was creepy. Her walking around on the hands.
Yes.
It was suitably creepy.
The Queen is actually on mission. Yep. She knows she needs to get plugged into the ship to fly them around the sun, and she just says, "Allow me," and she goes up to the interface and plugs herself in and flies them around the sun. And it's like, okay, Queen is on mission. Good.
Yeah. Well, and because she's got a stake in it, because she's the last Borg. If she can change the timeline, she can get the collective back.
She also destroys the ships that are pursuing them with just directly targeting their deflector dishes and blowing them up.
I wonder if we're going to have a causality situation, by the way, with this is why, like, we started off with the Borg Queen showing up, wanting the Borg to become members of the Federation. Is this going to be caused by these events of the rest of the season? I wonder.
Well, they're going to do something where at least some of the Borg join the Federation, I predict, because that's what they set up to do, and then they freaked out when the Borg, even though the Borg were still saying, we want peace, but we need to do this first. And then they didn't trust the Borg. And so this is the classic Star Trek plot of, okay, we encounter the strange, scary life form, and it turns out and we freak out and we don't trust them, but it turns out they were telling the truth all along, and now we can be friends. And Q, and that's been reinforced by Q. Like in the second episode, Q is telling Jean-Luc Picard, I didn't do this. I mean, it's like, I'm showing you a universe of your own making. And in this episode, as they're starting to get ready to go back in time, Q suddenly appears over Picard's shoulder and says, let's see what else has been lost in the wake of your fear. And he's obviously referring to their fear of the Borg that led him to blow up the Stargazer.
Right. So the Borg have been lost. And I think that's what's going to happen is the Borg Queen, when she says right before the ship explodes, look up, when the Stargazer, that's going to be, he's going to reveal some information to her somehow, or that she's got information from him his time as Locutus, maybe. That might be it too. Anyway, that's a lot of speculation. Yeah.
Also, the Borg Queen is now talking just like the hybrid on Battlestar Galactica, as she's hooking herself in to get ready for the round the sun trip. She's going, move forward to go backwards, shatter to mend. The past is now. It's like, thank you. I've seen this kind of disordered dialogue before.
Right. Yep. And then we have the slingshot around the sun, and it's interesting how.
And for once, it doesn't involve floating heads.
And mannequins diving into the ocean. But there is some similarity to the voyage home, the voyage home time travel effect, but different. You're like, there's difference.
It's better. They communicate the essence of this is a really weird experience, but without floating phrenology statue heads.
Yes. So when they arrive, we get the requisite. We don't know when we are, so we need to tell you that there's no radioactive fallout, but there is air pollution and ozone depletion and no moon colony. So that sort of sets us in time for 2024. It's before the big wars.
Which, according to other sources in the Star Trek universe, should happen in 2026.
Awesome. Got that to look forward to. What else can happen? The timeline may have accelerated. Anyway, they crash land. Is it at Chateau Picard?
I think that's the implication. So they're falling out of the sky. They're about to hit Los Angeles. Agnes points out rightly, you'll step on a lot of butterflies if we crash into Los Angeles.
So as a disagreement point, on when Picard takes over control helm, it shows on the console 34.5 degrees north, 118.1 degree west, which happens to be right close to Vasquez Rocks.
Oh,
which interesting. Picard saying we're home, because how many scenes they film at Vasquez Rocks throughout Star Trek.
But in the dialogue, and so okay, that would make sense. But on a writing level, they've written it badly then, because he says, "I'm taking us home," and home needs to be a place out in the wilderness. And Picard could know that Vasquez Rocks is not
that remote.
Is not that remote, he wouldn't know the state. He wouldn't plausibly know the state of Vasquez Rocks in 2024, but he could plausibly know the state of Chateau Picard in 2024, like it wasn't built for a century or something, and it was just woods before that.
The scene is dark. This is like all modern streaming TV. It's way dark when they crash, but it looked like the chateau was in the background. Like there was
something in the background.
Yeah,
there was a building in the
empty.
background.
So my guess is Chateau Picard is an abandoned vineyard winery at this point, or it's no vineyard there. And he knew that at this time period, whichever case.
And it could mean that what was showing on the display was their current coordinates. And that's where they ended up. But that would be quite the fall from Southern California to France.
Yeah, that's implausible in and of itself. I mean, that's a substantial chunk of, that's thousands of miles. You're going a substantial number of radians to get there around the Earth.
Yeah. So when I looked up those coordinates and saw that it was just, in the mountains right outside of Los Angeles there, it's like, oh, that's what this is a wink and a nod at the fans of, we're home because we filmed here so much type of deal.
That's true. That's possible.
That's the way I took it. But
okay. Well, maybe we'll see. We'll see in upcoming. But we get this dramatic moment where they need the Queen in order to get back. Okay, because she's the only one who can calculate the trajectory.
And this is the thing they don't point out.
Yes.
It's like they say, oh, we need to know what the Queen knows about where to find the Watcher and when history is going to change. And it's like, dude, you need the Queen to go home.
Right. Yeah. And so they need to keep her alive. And so they're diverting all the ship's power to, saving her, including from sickbay. So we've had this choice of her or Elnor.
Well, she was the one that diverted all the power. They didn't do it. She grabbed all the power, and they had the choice whether or not to disconnect her.
Right.
Yeah,
Raffi's like, disconnect her. Yeah.
Rios was going to shoot her in the head, and Picard says, no, we need her because of these other reasons that aren't the actual one.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, they need to know who the Watcher is so that and when the event is going to happen so they can fix the timeline. I mean, that's obviously more important. But
they've already got a plan on that, or they quickly develop a plan on that. Oh, this Watcher must know something about time travel. Let's look for alien tech in Los Angeles.
Yes, exactly. And this Raffi, once Elnor dies, Raffi goes off on Picard, and she accuses him of playing games with Q and jousting and playing around with people's lives for sport. And it's like, well, no, that's Q. Picard is not doing that.
Q says that.
He's involuntary. Yeah, exactly.
I love what he's trying to comfort her at one point, and he says, I know what you're feeling right now. And I love her response, and I love the performance by the actress. It's like, I promise you do not. Because what I'm feeling right now is intense, sharp disappointment in leadership. And it's like, that's about the cruelest thing she could have said to him.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. That was, I mean, he has experienced loss for sure. And very close loss to him.
Yeah, but I am pissed off at you because of how bad a leader you are.
Right.
Is that goes to the heart of Picard's character.
Yes. Yep. So they decide to split up. Raffi, Seven, and Rios are going to go find the Watcher, while Picard and Jurati fix the Borg Queen, which is
It's
plausible.
It's not so much they decide. It's Rafi says, "I'm going."
Yeah,
and I'm going, Picard. I'm not listening to you now. I'm going to go deal with this. And Rios and Seven decide, I think we'll go with her just to make sure she doesn't, end the world or something. She's so mad.
And it's plausible because Picard, being an elderly guy, doesn't need to be running around action hero in Los Angeles, all that sort of stuff at this point. I mean, maybe he'll eventually end up there, but it's possible he stays behind.
I like a bit of dialogue that Agnes has where she, without explaining it, she says, "Watch out for butterflies." And that's a callback to the classic science fiction story, The Sound of Thunder, which is it's like from the 1950s, if I recall correctly. And in The Sound of Thunder, what happens is you have this time travel safari service that will take you back in time to dinosaur days so you can hunt a dinosaur. And they have, using their technology, they identify a dinosaur that's just about to die anyway. It's like going to fall over dead in a minute. And so it's safe for you to kill it. You won't be changing history. It was going to die anyway. So as a safari guy, you get to go back and shoot a dinosaur. But they tell you, do not get off the path that they've set up for you, because they've vetted this path. It's safe for you to walk on it. But if you get off of it, then you can cause history to change. And so we have this story where this guy goes back in the past. He gets to shoot his dinosaur, but he steps off the path and steps on a butterfly. And then when he gets back to his own time in our future, there's a totalitarian dictatorship in place because of the butterfly he stepped on. And so stepping on the butterfly is the sci-fi, trope for don't accidentally change history. And so Agnes tells them, don't, watch out for butterflies. And I like the fact they don't have to explain that to the audience. It's like I just did.
It's pretty pop culture now. Like Jurassic Park had it with Jeff Goldblum, and then was the movie Butterfly Effect and that sort of stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah. Although the modern Butterfly Effect, even though it's similar conceptually, has a different origin. Okay. But also she makes it concrete and she says, look, don't get taken to any hospitals. Don't interact with any authorities. Don't go through any checkpoints. Don't let anybody scan you because you've got ID implants and vaccination chips in you that they haven't invented yet.
Right.
That was a good, I like that attention to detail there. That's good attention to detail in the writing part.
Yeah. On the other hand, I would know exactly how to explain that stuff if they scanned me.
Alien implants.
I'm a magician, and these are implants to allow me to do magic tricks.
Oh, interesting.
Because there are magicians reportedly claiming they have those now.
Oh, wow.
I was going to say they're experimental. I can't talk about them. I'm part of the experiment. It'll come out someday, but right now it's classified.
Or just, I knew I've been abducted by aliens.
Exactly.
Oh, there you go.
They're alien implants. It's alien technology.
It's always aliens.
There's that episode of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World that explains it.
And if they dig them out and it's like, wow, this is futuristic tech. See, I told you, aliens.
And you're not lying. So they determine, Picard and Jurati, that someone has to mentally interface with the Borg Queen. But it can't be him because since
she'd take him over in 2 seconds.
Yes, but Agnes would have more time, and Picard's first against it. But she's like, we could slow her down. You could pull me out at any time where it seems like I've gone in too far. This seems like a really bad idea, but she goes for it.
Yeah, I'm not entirely happy with this because what on earth is Agnes supposed to do to help a Borg Queen regenerate by linking with her mentally? This is just out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Deus Ex Machina technology. An ordinary human woman, you plug her into a Borg, she's going to become a Borg. She's not going to help the Borg Queen get out of emergency survival mode.
Right. Yeah, you wonder, what is it? They don't even give us a hint at what's actually going on. I'm going through her mind and I see a door that I unlock. Or, there's none of that.
I know. Yeah. They should give us some visuals or something.
Yeah.
Well, and it's the other way around. It's the Queen's poking through Jurati's mind instead of the other way around.
Right. Although it turns out it's a little both ways. That's the reveal.
Well, I wonder what they could have done instead of Picard looking at the iPad, instead of plugging the iPad into the Queen and using it to get that information.
Yeah, right. I think I get an app for that. So we have this problematic transport to LA that transporters aren't working great. They get separated. Raffi ends up in the Terminator.
I do like. Sorry, I do have a thing I like where Picard gets a line about the assimilation. Agnes is pointing out this is only a partial assimilation I'm going to do, and Picard says halfway to hell is not a recommended destination.
Yes. I like that line. You may hear that again from me. So they have this problematic transport to L.A. And of course, Rios materializes in midair, like next to a fire escape, and ends up smashing his head into the ground. Like he's not dead. I mean, that's a pretty bad hit. Avoid hospitals. So he ends up in a neighborhood clinic where they cater to people who need to stay off the grid and, illegal aliens or undocumented aliens, or whatever we say these days, where he has dropped his communicator, it gets picked up by a kid, and he has to get it back from him. At some point.
I did like his reaction when he took the bite of the cookies and he's like, this is real peanut butter. It's not replicated,
Yeah. And Bart is with the kid to get the communicator back. And the kid plays him really well, actually.
And it turns out the kid who has the communicator is the son of the cute doctor.
Right.
And so she just waltzes in and takes the plate of cookies and says, you just got played.
Yeah.
He would have given it back anyway. You just got played. Because he was going to give the kid the whole plate of cookies in exchange for the communicator.
Right. Yep. And of course, it's the Spanish-speaking guy with the Spanish accent who ends up in the no paper, no police, no questions clinic where the doctor thinks he's an illegal and the cop's going to show up and that sort of thing. Like if it were Raffi or even more Seven, it would have been no question. We don't suspect you of being undocumented and all this other stuff. But for dramatic purposes, it's got to be Rios, of course.
I do like how. Go ahead, Father.
I was going to say we learn a little bit more about Rios in this conversation while the doctor's distracting him before putting his finger back in place.
I was just going to mention that.
That looked way painful. But we find out that his mom was an instructor at the academy, at Starfleet Academy, and he broke into at like 8 years old, broke into the simulator. The Starship simulator, and was the best person ever, got the highest score ever on the simulator.
Right.
And that's how he ended up as a helmsman.
Right.
And the reason he's telling this, although he doesn't say Starfleet because he's watching out for butterflies, but he tells this story in a way that it won't upset the timeline. But the reason he's telling it is that cute doctor, he's got a dislocated finger that needs to be reset. And as the doctor's making friends with him, she says, tell me your favorite childhood story. And so he thinks about it and he comes up with this story. And then as he's getting to the climax of the story, snap, she relocates his finger and says, cute story. And we realize it was all a distraction so she could set his finger.
Oh, yeah, that looks painful. Oh, I saw it coming too. She's not asking because she's really interested. Yeah. She's distracting him. So Raffi materializes in among some trucks, but Seven is in a park where she materializes in front of this little girl who's a dog. And she says, are you a superhero? And Seven kind of winks at her and goes, can you keep my secret? Sure.
It's a really touching moment. I love that.
It was a very cute scene. Raffi is then walking through, a sanctuary district. This is 2024 from the, we had Deep Space Nine episodes where Sisko.
Past tense,
right. Thank you. Sisko and Bashir ended up in 2024 in the sanctuary districts for the Bell riots. And we see a sign, actually. I don't know if you guys saw, there was a sign in the background that said Sanctuary District. So this is
the same exact kind of sign. It was the Sanctuary District regulations.
Right.
And it's instead of being like a neighborhood that had been walled off, this was a homeless camp.
Yeah.
That was made into the Sanctuary District.
And it's interesting. I'm curious if we're going to go further with this, if they're going to go any further with this idea of the sanctuary, play this up at all, maybe even bring in the Bell riots, which would be kind of fun.
Yeah, because we don't know when in 2024 this is. We don't know if this is before or after those riots, or concurrent with it. This could be the same time frame too.
It's definitely the same year, but there is a complication in getting too far into the Bell riots in that. So if you haven't seen those Deep Space Nine episodes, Sisko and the gang travel back to 2024, and it's a pivotal moment in history. There were these riots in the San Francisco Sanctuary District involving a figure named Gabriel Bell. And the riots that resulted as a result of Gabriel Bell had a big impact on history. So they need to happen. Unfortunately, when they get there, the real Gabriel Bell dies prematurely, and Sisko has to step in and take Gabriel Bell's place and act out Gabriel Bell's part in history in order for the riots to happen. And since Avery Brooks, who played Benjamin Sisko, is way older now, and B, doesn't act anymore, it would be hard to pull him in. I mean, I'd love to see him return at some point, but I doubt he's going to be showing up for this, especially given the fact, I mean, he could play an older admiral version of himself.
Right.
But he wouldn't be able to play Gabriel Bell the way he did when he was,
years ago.
Well,
25 years ago.
I can see if they pull this in, pull that plot line in, that they would use footage from the episode, whether it is footage that was left on the cutting room floor, or do it like over the TV, like a TV report, and show. Or they could show Sisko or something like that.
Or they could recast the historical Gabriel Bell before he dies.
Yep.
I don't see them, making a big deal out of the Bell riots, though, because this is a different city. It's in Los Angeles instead of San Francisco. But I could see that being mentioned somewhere along the way.
That's what I was thinking. Is that maybe it like happens off screen contemporaneously. That was my thought. But it's fun because Rafi, as she's walking through, gets mugged. And she's like, "Oh, how cute!" And then she basically takes the gun away from the guy, pistol whips him, and takes his money because she doesn't have any. And
then she takes the clip out of the gun and throws it in a trash can.
Yeah,
and I'm like, "You idiot! Keep the gun." They've left all of their phasers back on La Sirena because they're temporarily out of place and could affect the timeline. I mean, they had a whole Voyager 2-parter about that.
Yeah.
So here, someone has just given you a weapon that's appropriate to this time period. You don't have another weapon. Keep it. Yeah. Also, you're putting it in a trash can in a crime infested area. Someone's going to come along, find it, put a new clip in it, and use it for no good. It's right. You're going to handle it more responsibly than whoever else would likely find it.
And they do show her dismantling it, where she pulled the slide off of it, but still, I agree with you. It's not going to be that hard. It's like, oh, here's the handle. I bet the slide's around here somewhere, and start digging.
Exactly.
The clip's around here somewhere.
Anyone who owns a gun that has a slide knows, oh, well, I take this off every time I clean it. So it's easy to put back together.
Yeah. Just, throw it in the sewer, or part of it in the sewer or something. Yeah.
But better yet, keep it and use it for yourself.
Yeah. So 7 comes along, and we get the requisite sermon about how bad society was in 2024.
There is a stinger, though, about it where Raffi says, "I'm surprised that a society with this level of contradictions didn't fall apart sooner than it did."
Than it did.
Ouch.
Yeah. And then we get a scene where Agnes is connected to the Borg Queen, and it's a very creepy assimilation sort of scene where they end up swapping voices. Yeah.
So you have Agnes's little girl-ish voice coming out of the Borg Queen, and the Borg Queen's sinister seductress voice coming out of Agnes's little girl face.
Yeah. That was very reminiscent of Doctor Who Midnight.
Yeah. Very much.
I gotta say, I really like Annie Wershing here as the Borg Queen. I've seen her in a bunch of different things, and I really like her as an actress, and she does a really good job here with the Borg Queen. She's suitably seductress, creepy monster, kind of like she's really good at this. So they end up having to go to a place, Seven and Ralphie go to a place called the Mark Ridge Tower, which I'm going to guess is not a real place. I didn't look it up.
Nah.
But,
The tower itself is a real tower, but it's Wiltshire Tower, but it's not the actual name of it.
Not the Mark Ridge Industrial Tower in real life.
Nope.
Okay. So Seven and Ralphie have to talk their way past a security guard because they're trying to get as high as they can to get as good as sensor coverage with their tricorder, which I'll talk about in a second. Yeah.
So they can scan for the alien tech.
They have to. They kind of talk past them like it's a important place to them in their relationship or something like that. And it works. And Seven's surprised, like, strangers don't usually like me, she says.
Because normally she's got Borg implants on her face.
Yeah, exactly. And that's when Rafi says, you in 2024 should get a room, which I thought was kind of a funny line.
Yeah.
And then they scan for the tech using a Samsung Galaxy Fold tricorder. I mean, that is clearly a Samsung Galaxy Fold phone. There's not. They didn't even really dress it up all that much.
See, their Android is the future. Android is the future, not iOS.
Apparently, yes. Apparently, well, in the bad alternate future, frankly, actually, that's
still the future.
The dark evil timeline where Android rules. Yeah.
So they get a signal that comes and goes. They also get the signal from Rios's communicator that the kid's playing with, flickering it on and off, and so they know where he is nearby. The Queen wakes, by the way, back on the ship, and is lucid now, like she's not all out of it, and demands control of the ship. But it turns out she doesn't hold any cards.
She explains the reason she is lucid now is because it's before the split in time. So she's not getting bleed over from two different timelines, and she's more coherent.
Yes, right. And she basically says we can, go back and forth over, you negotiating with me, but we know that I have all the cards here, so you have to capitulate. And that's when Agnes reveals that she stole the information out of the Borg Queen's mind and then somehow blocked her from accessing it. Like,
she's got it in a file called Stuff I Stole from the Borg Queen, except it's not the word stuff. It's another word that starts with S.
Yes. Yeah. that was funny. The very Agnes moment there. So so they have the information.
The Queen is angry and says, you have just done something far more dangerous than you realize. You've impressed me. And so, we're building to more Agnes Queen, some kind of interaction, because now the Queen is specifically interested in Agnes and what she could do with her.
Yes. Yep. And that's when Picard says, I think you need to be very far from her. So then we get the scene where ICE officers, Immigration, shows up at the clinic where Rios is, and he can escape, but of course Mr. Chivalry has to go back and help the Dr. Teresa. And
it's not just chivalry; it's also he realizes the badge is sitting there on her desk.
Right, he needs the
because he touches his chest where the badge is and goes, "Oh,
oops!"
Yeah.
So they both
just
get
about
arrested.
to get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he comes back in dressed in a doctor's, lab coat and is pretending to be a doctor that works with Teresa and the cute doctor, and he says, come back here and I'll help you with that 13-year-old kid who's about to bleed out. Or something. He's pretending there's a medical emergency in the back room to get her away from the immigration people. And she says to him in Spanish, what do you think you're doing? And he says back, I'm trying to help you. And I'm going, guys, La Migra speaks Spanish.
Yes.
They it's part of their job. So you're not going to be hiding what you're saying from them just by switching into Spanish. They're going to know what you're saying.
Yeah, I have friends who are border patrol up on the northern border, but they worked down on the southern border, and they're conversational Spanish. It's not great Spanish, but they're good enough that they would understand that conversation and go, oh, you're trying to help her. Why are you trying to help her?
At which point you could come up with, well, I just said there's a 13-year-old kid back here about to bleed out.
Exactly.
But, yeah.
So he's the officers asked for his UHC card, which is a reference to the DS9 episode Past Tense, where they need to have their UHC cards. Teresa wonders if Rios is being brave or stupid, and the ICE officer, who realizes he doesn't have ID, says, I'm going with stupid, which is good. Yeah. So when they were told to avoid hospitals and police, Rios has now broken both.
And he'll probably get scanned here at some point.
Yes, scanning has got to be in the cards.
And Seven and Raffi are going to come break him out of jail.
Yeah, it's just like Star Trek IV, Voyage Home, where they had to break out. In what I'm sure will have been a much more entertaining breakout for Chekhov, this will probably be less comedic and fun than that one.
Yeah, that was kind of a note I mentioned, is there's a lot of this that's a Star Trek 4 redo.
Yes.
You know, there's very much, instead of whales, they're looking for the Watcher instead.
Yeah, also, it kind of echoes the Voyager Season 5 episode Timeless, where Chakotay and Harry Kim go back in time to fix a mistake.
Yes, and they beat Sarah Silverman, which is a weird guest spot.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, in fact, if you think about it, this does mirror Voyage Home a lot. I mean, there's Admiral, they're on a ship that they shouldn't be on, that's not a Starfleet ship, and like they recalled it when they talked about we have the Borg Queen, not Spock, to do the calculations. So it's very interesting. I'm curious how far they'll take that mirroring of Voyage Home. That should be interesting.
It would be fun to see a sign in the background for the new exhibit up in San Francisco of George and Gracie
at the Cetacean Institute. Yeah, that would be fun. So, Father Cory, any last
except
notes?
That would have been back in the 1980s.
Yes, 30 years ago. Late. Maybe we could have like the pod of George and Gracie or something. Their baby whale that they had or something. Anyway, Father Cory, any last notes?
So when Raffi materializes, they've got a remix of California Dreamin', the song from the Mamas and the Papas,
and it's not by Mama Cass is not singing it.
Yeah, no, this is as far as I can tell, I didn't look closely, but as far as I can tell, this is something they had made for this episode. This isn't like a cover, because there's been covers through the years. Beach Boys did a cover and stuff like that, but this is not the original. This is something, but I think was made for the episode. But because like my Android phones can pick up music and do the recognition, and it wasn't showing anything. So I think it was a remake. And then the guard
probably would have saved them a little bit of money in that you're not paying the artist, you're just paying the mechanical license to.
It's actually
exactly
by an artist named Freischwimmer, who has they have it's on an album, so it's like a remix they did a while ago. Yeah.
Okay. Well, still, as a smaller artist, you won't pay as much as you would to the estate of the Mamas and the Papas.
Exactly.
By the way, I have done at times frequently California Dreaming as a singing call when calling square dances, and the lyrics do nicely kind of fit the environment they're beaming into. I mean, the lyrics in the plot in California Dreaming is from the viewpoint of someone who's on the East Coast in a cold, wintry environment. And then, but if I was in California, I'd be safe and warm if I was in LA. And they're beaming into LA and it's warm and they're kind of safe. I was pleased that they included the middle verse in the bridge in the song, which talks about going into a church and praying, and that also fits with this in that they're on this desperate mission. They kind of need heavenly help. But given how secular Star Trek can be, I didn't know if they'd use that verse or not, but they did.
Yep. Yeah. No, it was a good. It was a good catch to hear that. And then. The guard who catches Seven and Raffi up at the top of the tower was played by Matthew Comiskey. And he should look familiar for those of us who have watched Enterprise, because he played a crewman in the mess hall. Yeah, Cunningham in the second season. So we haven't gotten to him yet in this rewatch. But so he's been in Star Trek before, back in Enterprise.
Oh, yeah. He did look familiar. That's fun.
He's doing other things, obviously, as well. He's another one of those actors that's, he's behind this. He's a, B actor in some, mini series. So,
Jimmy, any final notes?
Let's see. We once more had ridiculous waiting for commands to be given, which I just hate. It's like this all should happen automatically. You don't need to wait, and especially you don't need to tell people to wait for my order. Right. The computer can time this much better than you can. Let the computer assume firing control. Let the computer assume navigation control. That's what it's for. This time Rios is like making them wait for his command to fire. It's like, why? Just why? This doesn't make any sense. But it's such a trope. When Elnor died, I had in my notes, this is too soon. In episode, because we're only in episode 3. And if you want to build up to a permanent death, it couldn't be this, or of a major character like him, it couldn't be this early. So I said to myself immediately, stasis, ? Because they are putting him into some tube-like thing, and they could bring him back that way. And my next note is restored to life in the last episode by time wipe, which they then immediately hang a lantern on of, will Elnor come back if we fix history? I don't know. Well, of course he will. So why then would they kill Elnor in episode 3? And it seems that the obvious answer is because they don't want him to be the super competent action man while they're back in 2024. They want to force the action to be shouldered by the other characters and not have someone super competent, because Elnor is basically a superhero. He's Karate Kid from the 31st century, from the Legion of Superheroes, the original Karate Kid before the movies. That the movies had to pay royalties to use the name. So it's to get him out of the way because he's too good at action. If they're in a low-tech environment where people aren't waving beam weapons around.
Plus, he won't have to wear a ridiculous hat to hide his ears.
Yeah, my friend got his head caught in a mechanical rice picker. Yeah. Which we actually have these days, I guess. He's got as he's about to die, there's a nice callback to episode 1, because as he's about to die, he tells Raffi to get his medallion out of his pocket because it comforts him. And she does, and she reads what's on it in Romulan, and it says, now is the only moment. And Elnor presumably had her get it in part because he knows this is the only moment for him. He's about to die. But it's a callback to what, what's her name? Romulan lady told Picard. Laris told Picard in episode 1 about now is the only moment. And so, carpe diem, dude. Yes. After I have these mixed feelings about the death of Elnor. I'm not entirely happy with them because it seems to me the reason they're killing him now is because they're getting him out of the way, and it's not a satisfying death, and it causes Raffi to spiral off into this. I'm so driven by grief, I'm irrational, and don't you try to grief counsel me, Seven, and I'm just going to press through in this irrational manner. And then they've already hung a lantern on the fact he's going to come back. So it feels messy to me from a writing perspective. I'm not happy about that. Also, so the introduction of Teresa as Rios's apparent love interest is interesting. If this really goes the full search for whales route, she could end up going back to the future with them like Dr. Jillian did. Doubt that will happen because she's got a son in 2024. On the other hand, if he falls for her hard, knowing World War III is going to start in 2 years, he might want to get him out of there. Yeah. But there's a bigger structural problem with this, which is when they divide the team and they have Seven, Raffi, and Rios go search for the Watcher, and then they have Agnes just pull that information out of the Queen's head, their side mission is pretty pointless.
Yeah.
I mean, they could have set it up by saying we're going to pursue these 2 lines of inquiry. Maybe one of them will succeed. But they don't set it up that way. They send the trio off to L.A. as if this is how we're going to find the Watcher, and then they Deus Ex Machina the same information out of the Queen's head with Agnes. And it's jangly. This is like, it feels artificial. You're just giving these characters something to do instead of having a rational plan driving the plot forward.
That's true. That is true. One thing I want to mention too, by the way, is with another possibility for Eleanor to come back is the literal Deus Ex Machina in this show, which is Q. Q can bring people back to life from death, and that feels like it kind of sucks a little drama out of things, because I'm always half expecting Q to pull this. Whenever he's in a show, no death is final until the credits roll. You know what I mean?
Unless you're the unnamed crewman at the helm,
right? Or Tasha Yar, for instance. I mean, it's just it can happen, but yeah, it just.
Eleanor's death just feels unsatisfying to me, the way it's played. It's not as bad as Tasha's death, obviously, but but it feels unsatisfying.
So that's our discussion of the Assimilation episode, and I did promise some listener feedback, so let's get to that, because we had quite a bit.
Did.
Yes, awesome listener feedback this week. It's always good. I don't read the bad stuff. So our first feedback comes from Paul Leone, who wrote on our YouTube channel, I didn't watch season 1 of Picard, but season 2 is off to a great start, in my opinion. Thanks for the podcast.
I agree. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. It is
so far, so good.
Yeah. We have a follow-up from Trey Kester, who sent us an email. Trey had told us that he didn't watch any Star Trek, but had been listened to all our episodes and needed some recommendations.
Impressive.
Yeah, no kidding. That's great.
We gave him some recommendations on stuff to watch. So here's his response. He says, thanks for the recommendations. I sat down and watched them all this past week and enjoyed each one. I think Balance of Terror and Wrath of Khan were my favorites, with Amok Time and The Undiscovered Country right behind them. I also watched Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, out of morbid curiosity, but unfortunately it wasn't bad enough to be entertaining like I hoped, just kind of boring.
Yeah,
it's not quite Mystery Science Theater level.
Yeah.
It's and that was my experience too on rewatching it for the podcast. Was this isn't as bad as people say it is. It's just not great.
Yeah, exactly. Then he says, as far as listening to the podcast versus watching the show itself, I thought of 2 things of note. First, it was interesting trying to figure out who some of the characters I knew about from listening to the podcast, but hadn't seen visually before in pop culture were in the show. For example, Janice Rand and Christine Chappell in TOS and Beverly Crusher in TNG. I imagine this would be even more pronounced if I eventually watched the less famous shows like Voyager or Enterprise. Second, since you guys haven't gotten to season 2 of TOS yet, I realized that I wasn't super familiar with Chekhov and was surprised at just how much I enjoyed that character. Anyways, thanks again for the recommendations in the podcast. I'm definitely more open to watching more Star Trek now than I was before.
Yeah, and glad to hear it. Glad you enjoyed those. Chekhov is, in the movies, Chekhov is a bit player. He's most prominent in Wrath of Khan. He's got a more central role to the plot there, even though it's still a small role, and also in Search for Whales in Star Trek 4, where he gets to play more. He plays more for drama in Botany Bay, in Wrath of Khan, but he gets to play more for comedy. Admiral Chekhov in
where are the nuclear vessels?
We're looking for the nuclear vessels. Yeah, that's great.
It's the Enterprise.
Yeah. But in 4, but he really gets a lot. There's a lot more fun with him in seasons 2 and 3 of the original series.
Yeah. Yes. All right, and our next feedback comes from Patreon, where our patron Hot Glue Gunslinger says, in the recent episode of Star Trek Picard titled Penance, I think you missed something. It was very clear that all the main characters on the bridge of the Stargazer were returned to the alternate reality with their previous memories intact, including the Borg Queen. The Borg Queen was a prominent member of the events that were taking place, and there's no way that Q would have discarded her. I think the Borg Queen that the crew encounters in the alternate reality is the same Borg Queen from the Stargazer. Look at her shoulder devices. They are biomechanical arms coming out of her shoulders, suspending her in the stasis chamber that looks suspiciously like the Doc Ock arms that take over the Stargazer. I think that the Borg Queen was also sent back with her memories intact, but because she's the Borg Queen, her memories are fragmented. She's a little nutty, to say the least, but she knows what's going on, and she recognizes Seven of Nine as the tertiary adjunct, and she recognizes Picard as Locutus. You missed this relationship in your review of the episode, in my opinion.
Okay, everyone's entitled to their opinion. People frequently write in or periodically write in and say we missed something, and it may not be that we missed it. It may be that we saw it and didn't comment on it. It also may be that because these episodes have to have a finite length, given the limitations of physical matter and storage media. And it also may be that we considered it and didn't agree. And for myself, in this case, I would say that's the case. In episode 2, where we introduce the Borg Queen, they're pretty explicit about saying that this is the Queen from this timeline and she's getting bleed over information from other timelines. And so I don't think she's the same Queen, and she is physically different. I mean, she doesn't have legs. She doesn't have the head cowl that they made a big point out of. And in this episode as well, it seems like she's native to this timeline, and before the split, she's functioning okay. So I did, wonder, at least briefly, is this the same Queen from the Stargazer? But I don't think it is, given what they've established. But that's, other people can have other opinions.
Well, and the fact that they stated in the second episode that the queens are all connected through temporal blah 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 and all this other stuff, that they can know of the existence of other queens in other universes and all that this could go half dozen one way, half dozen the other. I mean, it could be the Queen from the Stargazer, it could be a different Queen. I don't think it's something that's quite as certain. Appreciate the comments, but I don't think we miss it. I just don't think we agree, as Jimmy said.
Yeah.
Well, in individual, I mean, each of us three has to speak for himself.
Yeah. I was going to say that in this episode, in Assimilation, I think it goes further to show that if she were the Queen from their universe, she would have said something along those lines. I mean, she would have said something about what she was doing on the Stargazer, and this one does not have any of that. Doesn't bring any of that up, even when she becomes lucid and aware and all of the rest. So it's not definitive. I mean, you could still be right, I suppose, but it really feels like it's the other. It's the other direction. But yeah, we'll see. We got a bunch more episodes to go. Kelly Brown writes on Facebook, great discussion of a great episode. So far, I'm liking this season of Picard much better than last season. This storyline is much more interesting to me than the hunt for Robot Girl and the creepy Romulan siblings.
Oh, yeah. I remember Drusilla and her brother, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Previously, I never much liked the Mirror Universe episodes of Trek, but I'm liking how they're handling this Mirror Universe much better. I agree with Jimmy that an alternate timeline is an alternate universe. One of the things that always bothered me about the Mirror Universe was that the names of the ships were the same as in the Prime Universe. But in this one, the Enterprise is renamed to something far more appropriate to the timeline. Something like, Planet Gobbler or something.
World Razor.
That's what it is. That's what it is. I did like that the characters didn't spend much time hand-wringing over having to act like their alternate timeline persona to fit in. They just went with it. We didn't spend half the episode seeing characters like Picard trying to take the moral high ground and refuse to act like evil. As for the Borg Queen, the fact that she can see the different timelines and know that something is wrong reminds me of another sci-fi show. Terry Matalas, who's the showrunner for this season, was the showrunner for the television series 12 Monkeys, which was on the Sci-Fi Network. The show should have gotten much more love than it did. It was a great show that I highly recommend. In that universe, time has been broken, and there are people in that universe referred to as primary that can see the multiple broken timelines. Because of that, they act crazy and just blurt out seemingly disconnected phrases from the different broken timelines that turn out to be important to the plot. In that show, one primary character was in the main cast and was used as a guide to repairing time. The Borg Queen was acting just like those primary characters on 12 Monkeys. Terry Matalas has borrowed that concept from his previous show.
Interesting. I've seen the movie, but I haven't by Terry Gilliam, but I haven't seen the original. I haven't seen the TV show they did later.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it myself.
I remember when it was on. I just haven't seen it.
It's also a little like Minority Report, where we had the people in the pool who also were seeing. I think they were seeing like alternate timelines, wasn't it? Something like that. I forget now, but yeah, very similar. Excellent. Well, thank you all for your feedback. Fantastic. We also had some fun feedback from someone who is looking for our discussion of a second season episode of TOS and couldn't find it, and had to write back saying that's because we haven't done that, unless you are remembering the alternate universe version, the mirror universe version of our podcast, where we've discussed it. In that one, none of the three of us have beards, because that's what makes us mirror universe.
Or did you come from the future where we discuss it eventually and what's the future like? And
that's right. That's right. But but you can find all of our episodes on sqpn.com/trek. That's where we have all of our stuff. All right, let's wrap things up there. We want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create Secrets of Star Trek, including Irnuz R., Paul O., David M., Michael V., and John G. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at Star Trek. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. We'd love to hear what you think of Assimilation, this episode of Picard, so we can read it in a future episode. You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, or our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, or send an email to trek@sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the next new episode of Star Trek Picard called The Watcher. Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you, Dom.
Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Yes, I am. The future is now.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, halfway to hell is still not a recommended destination.